Okay, great.
Okay. This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us Suzanne Pittson, vocalist and educator, and also Bevan Manson, jazz pianist, classical pianist too, right, Bevan?
Classical composer.
Composer. Okay. Well, how did you and Suzanne, the two of you, come to work together?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us here. And hello, Chicago, my hometown,
Yeah.
technically.
Oh, really? Your hometown?
Just born there. Didn't
Oh,
live there very long,
and
but
then went to New York.
then went to New York.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I met Suzanne when I was running the jazz department at UC Berkeley. And I ended up hiring Suzanne, actually. We may have done a gig or so before that, but
We did a gig, yeah, with Peter Barchet. We did,
Peter Marchais, that's right.
suddenly you had a gig, you needed a vocalist, and he recommended me. And so that was the beginning of ours.
Oh my gosh. Wow, that's back around 1999, probably.
Yeah, no, not
Um,
quite that early.
no?
Well, 2002 or something.
Yeah, something like, yeah, 2001 maybe.
Yeah, maybe that.
It had to be 2000,
Oh,
maybe
yeah,
even
because,
2000.
yeah, probably 2001.
And so Suzanne stayed on and I hired Suzanne to coach the vocal students. And she worked really, really hard at that, was there from, long hours at different times. And
With
we did,
Evan in tow. Remember, Evan was
yes, but
small.
your son was very small then. And so, yeah, and so we got to know each other musically, and the recording was a little bit later that we did, that's now Conversations,
Is
but
that
that's how
the
we
first
started.
album that you ever did together?
Yeah, and it wasn't we didn't plan to do that. Well, we had started playing duo gigs, right? We played some duo gigs and it was really fun. I don't know, it was uh we sort of, it was very I really enjoyed playing with Bevan, first of all because you're such an incredible composer. So a pianist who's also a great composer is going to be composing on the spot. Is going to be composing on the spot. So I just remember uh, one of the early gigs. We were going over some tunes, and I said, "Do you remember how we did it the last time?" And you go, "No, we don't worry about that. We got to do. We'll do it differently this time." And that just clicked for me, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to play with Bevan, then I have to be in the moment and on my toes, Im- improvising,
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
jazz musician. So that was really, I felt that that was a, part of the fun of that.
But you
And one
like
of the great,
improvising anyway, because whenever I hear you, you're always improvising, it seems.
Right. But I think that experience, some of those experiences made me realize that that was the only thing that I needed to do. In other words, uh, going in with a prepared set of ideas was not going to fly in this particular configuration.
What were
one
you
of the
going to
great
say,
things,
Bevan?
Oh,
one of the great things about Suzanne's singing, though, that made this a lot more significant to me compared to a lot of vocal situations is that unlike many vocalists, Suzanne has an astonishing knowledge and command over harmony. And so she really functions when she sings as an instrumentalist. And it's not just about the scat singing being the kind of vernacular for, jazz singers singing without words, but it's a little more than scat singing. It's got a real harmonic construction to it, which was great for me because then I could work off of that and either do other things or be complementary, um, or create different colors underneath the harmony that she was creating, because it was so clear. I mean, I could tell right away, just like, like so many classical composers like Bach, who outlines harmony a lot in his lines. That's what Suzanne did in a bebop style. And so it was really great for me because I felt, wow, I mean, this is a vocalist, but this is also an alto saxophonist who's, just going at lightning speed, through the chord changes.
Oh, wow.
And
Thank you.
and so I was, it was very, I was really, I was really, it was great to do that because, first of all, I love working with vocalists anyway because they love the melody, and a lot of times melody gets obscured, but to me melody is extremely important. So Suzanne had that, but she also had the harmonic underpinning to make something else happen completely different. And that's why when I said, no, let's forget it, we're going to do it completely. I must have been crazy those days, though. I mean, I was dealing with a work overload, and I wanted to sort of let it all hang out when I played. And so, but that came to fruition on the album, I think. It really,
Yeah, well, I wanted to submit something for a jazz vocal competition. It was when they had the Jazz Connect competition, I think, Connect vocal competition, and very much like the Sarah or one of those, And I I said, Bevan, could we go do a few tunes and I'll put them on this website, And so we just showed up at Dave Bell's studio in Richmond, California, because I was living in California, as was Bevan. And we just went in and did we did actually 5 tunes, I think, and 4 of them we recovered off of that tape and put them out. But, when I think we had like a cassette of that session, and throughout the years, occasionally I would listen to Bird Like, and I think a few years back I sent you Bird Like. I said, "Here's that recording we did," and then I'm a Fool to Want You. Those 2 really stood out, and so whenever it was earlier this year, I said, "These are good. We should." We never intended to put it out, but then we managed to recover them from the engineer's tape, because it was done at a time when Pro Tools was just kind of getting going, right? 2002, I think. So Pro Tools was not the standard, and this had it kind of had a Pro Tools tape component. There was a tape component to it. So the engineer, Dave Bell, worked very hard to get those tracks off of there, and then sent us the things, and we kind of remixed them and put them in a state that had a nice reverb, and mastered them and whatnot. So that was those 4 tracks. But then there was one of Out of the Hub, which, do you want to talk about that?
Well, gosh, it was over 10 years ago, but I was lived in LA for about 25 years, and I did a lot of writing for different singers and different groups. And I had one session where I'm not sure what came first, but either Suzanne mentioned a particular Freddie Hubbard tune to me, or I thought about it, and then it turns out she had lyrics to it written by her son, Evan. And I decided, I had this time in the studio and I wanted to create a vehicle for her. So I went in with the orchestra and we recorded an orchestral track that I wrote, kind of a half arrangement, half recomposition of this particular Freddie Hubbard tune. That was at Conway Studios in Hollywood, where they do a lot of record dates in particular. So it was pretty appropriate. It was I wrote for a pretty large orchestra, woodwinds and brass and strings and rhythm section, percussion and a few other instruments. And so we didn't finish it at the time. We never finished it. I got busy with other things, and Suzanne got busy with other things, and eventually moved to New York.
Yeah, I was already in New York actually at
Oh,
that
okay.
point. And you had gone to, Bevan had moved to LA a few years before that, right?
Right.
From the Bay Area, and I had moved to New York in 2005. So
Right.
we were communicating. But actually, I had recorded that Freddie Hubbard record, and then I sent you the demo of it, I think. And then you go, wow, this, One of Another Kind would be a good.
Yeah.
I think that's how it kind of came about. And Evan was 15 at that point. He wrote those
Wow.
lyrics.
He wrote the lyrics. Yeah. So it's a real family effort. Um, and it just kind of sat around for quite a long time,
Years.
years and years. And at one point, I kind of rediscovered it in LA, and I could not find, much to my dismay, the part of the vocal track that was very important. Um, so I just tried a few other things. I went into a studio and did some overdubbing with a couple of musicians, made it a little bit more of an instrumental piece, even though Suzanne still had her scat solo on there. Um, and but then much later on, um, her son Evan uh, played musical detective and somehow found a bunch of the vocal tracks that made sense, and he started putting them together. Sent a kind of a rough mix to me. I wanted to do a little more with it, so at that point I was in New Mexico. I went into a studio in Santa Fe and did some more overdubs with a few woodwind players and brass players, and ended up with a much bigger piece. And we played around with it a little bit. I sent eventually, to make a long story short, I sent the material to Evan, and he did a lot of detective work, putting everything together so that it, you know, fit, and so that my score was represented. But then he went into a studio in Westchester County, I guess,
Right. Yeah, right near our
with
house. Yeah.
right, with
With
an
an
engineer
engineer,
there.
and
Yeah.
he did,
And
yeah.
lo and behold, it was like made into a completely new track. And that's how it came to be on the record. It really was very inspiring to me because it's a great orchestra, and I wanted to do a lot more. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking somewhere down the line we're gonna, end up doing some more orchestral stuff with Suzanne scatting. But for now,
Yeah.
it was great. It seems to be getting a lot of airplay, um, on and off. It's just amazing. Just the one track as a single.
Right.
Um,
It was a single in 2025, right? And then we ended up putting it on this EP to make it a longer EP.
right,
Because
right.
the having it as a single in a digital format was not as effective, I think, as having it on this EP and having a physical copy. But then, and also I ended up playing a synthesizer part with my scat solo. I ended up putting that on there, which ended up becoming something that I really want to pursue moving forward, playing lines and singing with my right hand.
That way you have an ensemble. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So how did the 42-piece orchestra come together? Were they actually ever together, or were they pieces and pieces of different orchestras compiled together into the end result being a 42-piece orchestra?
Most of the players in the original orchestral recording were regular studio players in Los Angeles who work together all the time in the studios, so they know each other quite well. There was one guy who wasn't in LA for very long who ended up playing a alto sax solo on it. He's now in the Bay Area, actually in oh well, I can't pronounce it, but it's a county that's just south of San Francisco, I think. Begins with a C. Coast, Contra Costa,
Oh, in Concord.
Concord, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Anyway, but all the rest of the musicians originally were studio players in LA, really great sight readers and very experienced players. They play for a lot of the films and TV shows, and they're just used to working together. And I knew a lot of them at that point anyway. So that was a whole. And then later on, when I did some overdubbing with a few other musicians, a couple of jazz players who were new to LA. And then later, after Suzanne had sent me the vocal tracks, I did some overdubbing in New Mexico with a couple of classical musicians, actually, and a couple of jazz musicians. So it's quite a mix of musicians from a couple of different states and also at different times. But it all fit together. And Evan was really helpful that way. He knew what I wanted, and he managed to get everything lined up so that it fit together.
So in other words, you're saying that the One of Another Kind was actually different musicians playing in the studio individually, and then Evan put everything together.
Well, the musicians didn't play individual. I mean, we recorded as an orchestra
Okay.
pretty much all together. So you had about 38 musicians playing at the same time. And they're used to that, of course. But then later, there were two separate overdub sessions where, I had to conduct musicians to be very precise with, what was going on in the score. And I just wrote some extra parts for them. I wanted to fill some things out. And it was really inspiring to have Suzanne's original vocal on there, the melody with the words by Evan, as well as her scat singing. So there were places where I wanted to react to that once I got to hear it all over again.
Right. And then when we were in the studio with Doug Epstein here in Dobbs Ferry, New York, we got you on a Zoom call at one point. I think
Right.
once or maybe
Yeah.
twice, and then played things for Bevan. It's amazing we can do this on Zoom now, right? It's like, and so he was listening, and then I remember at the beginning when I'm singing that unison line and rubato line, kind of at the very beginning with the horns, and like you said, that's supposed to be more integrated into the horn part, not on top of the horns. And so we fixed that, and then talked about the ending and whatnot. So it was a lot.
There's a lot of collaborating, quite a lot. It was really, really fun. Yeah. And the engineer was a real hoot. He kind of knew what we were trying to do, but he kept ribbing me, one way or the other. Oh, you think you're this, you think you're that.
Right.
So it was fun, though. Yeah, it's a miracle what you can do long distance. And, everybody played in a very musical way. So it wasn't as though we were being robotic and putting parts together like a jigsaw puzzle. It was more about the phrasing and the coloration, the timbres of the instruments. I wanted to make sure, like Suzanne mentioned, that there were some places where her voice was part of the orchestra. I wanted to make sure that came through. And I wanted to make sure the soloists, there are quite a few soloists actually in different places. I wanted to make sure they were part of the orchestra. But again, everyone played musically and everyone was very experienced, so it all came off really quite well. Yeah, I'm really happy with the result. And like I said, it seems to be getting airplay, so we're also happy with that too.
So were you filling out the parts for the melody, or were you filling out the parts for the story of the song? And what is the story behind One of Another Kind? Do you know?
Oh yeah. Well, you mean the lyric?
Yes.
Yeah, that's it's out of the mind of a 15-year-old,
Oh,
a very kind of precocious 15 year
He
old.
was, yeah, your
you mean
son.
your son?
Yeah, I've never used that word before for Evan. He kind of is very unassuming,
Yeah,
He's kind of unassuming, and then he just, goes into these places. Well, so this is, of course, it's called is One of Another Kind was the title of the Freddie Hubbard composition. So I had an idea that I was going to call that record that I did in 2010, I was going to call it Out of the Hub because it's the music of Freddie Hubbard. So coming out of the hub, so out of the hub. So Evan, he decided he was going to write lyrics called Out of the Hub for One of Another Kind, and he didn't really show them to me until he was done. And he's just writing it, and he goes, Mom, here, do you want to try these? And they were incredible. And so let's see if I can remember what some of them are, but basically the hub is a huge, like a diamond stupa that's in the middle of the forest or somewhere out there. And so he's talking about going out to this area, and all of a sudden this huge jeweled stupa is out there, and that is the hub. And out of that hub comes all these incredible sounds for the future. And that's what Freddie Hubbard was.
What's
He
a
had
stupa?
a stupa is like a giant, like a jeweled tower or a treasure tower, that could just, it sort of emerged from the ground, and came out. And then, but Freddie Hubbard represented that. I mean, he played stuff for the future. He did. That's the way I've always felt about his playing, and so many of the jazz musicians, but this happened to be a record of Freddie Hubbard music. So that was the idea. It's like music for the future. And I can't think of exact some of the lines right now off the top of my head, but that was pretty much the idea, that the hub was Freddie Hubbard, and he left this music for the future.
So
Yeah.
one of another kind is another what?
Hmm?
One
What?
of another kind is another what?
It's another what?
Yeah.
What, like what?
Yeah,
Well, what?
what was in Evan's mind when another what of another, like another kind of what?
Oh yeah. Well, he retitled it Out of the Hub.
Ah,
So he took Out of the Hub as the storyline, as the
ah,
title, as this, to create the story around this idea of this hub, and out of the hub comes these sounds left for the future.
oh,
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. It's very sci-fi, really.
Yeah.
Evan's a big sci-fi person, and I think it had that quality. But I at the time I did that record, I was trying to get permission from Freddie to write some of these lyrics, and because I did about 5 or 6 things of his with lyrics, and including Bird Like, which is on this record, this Conversations. But I I was in touch with his publisher and of Hubtones Music, and so I was almost ready to go in the studio, and I still hadn't gotten permission from Freddie. And so, right before the session, they wrote to me and said, "Can you send a demo?" So, so fortunately, Evan had finished those lyrics, and I did Bird Like, and I did another thing. And Jeff and I, my husband Jeff, playing piano, and I just did 3 quick demos of those 3 tunes and sent it to Freddie, and he said okay. But anyway, that's another story. But yeah, that tune, I just feel like Evan, I don't know how he understood that, how to tell a story like that in the lyric.
I think it's really one of the lines, I forget which, but there's different sections of the tune, and you're sort of in a holding pattern for a while, and then it goes into a the way I conceived the arrangement, and I wasn't really thinking about this at the time, but the way I conceived the arrangement was that at another point it would go into this very hard driving 4/4 groove, and somehow Evan's words at that very moment got very personal in terms of talking about Freddie, and it felt like exactly right to
Oh,
me
wow.
that suddenly Freddie, it's like Freddie, if Freddie was there, he would have sprung from behind a curtain with his trumpet, and leaped onto the stage at that moment, just energizing the crowd
Yeah.
completely. And so I really had some virtuosic things for the trumpets to do. I wrote some rather difficult moments for them. Luckily, they were three of the best studio players in LA, so they could do it. But it was, still a challenge. But it just added to the intensity. It was funny how that all kind of coincided. But I could really feel. I mean, not to be too dramatic, but I could just feel Freddie's presence right at that moment.
I guess there's a lot of depth to Freddie's music. Do you listen to a lot of Freddie Hubbard music at home, Suzanne? And that's what inspired Evan?
Oh, yeah. Well, I heard Freddie for the first time at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles with the VSOP with Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Ron Carter, Tony Williams, and Freddie filling in for Miles, right? He played. And I don't know what I was doing. I was a teenager, I think. I can't remember whether I was in college yet, or maybe I was in college. Maybe I was, because I played classical piano in college, but I always grew up with jazz. And then I started on my own to go hear Freddie every time he'd come to San Francisco. And then when Jeff and I got married, turns out he was a huge fan of Freddie Hubbard. And so we had this cassette tape that it had all these solos by Freddie, just like a solo tape. Like there were like 25 solos on there. And if you just listen through, you're just getting, and so that was like when I went into singing, when I, started singing jazz, that was kind of the first thing that I glommed onto. I said, well, I better start transcribing some of these things. And he's just such a great model for soloing. Beautiful
I,
model. But so, yes, I have listened to a lot.
I guess then you said that Evan really likes sci-fi, and he kind of combined the two together in his own way.
I think so. Yeah. I think he just knew to take the title out of the hub and then create something around that. And he came up with that. So
You spoke earlier of the five tracks being submitted for the competition, and how did that competition work out?
yeah, well, I don't think we got very far with it, but there were like, 200 vocalists on there.
Oh,
You know who won that was Kelly Johnson in Seattle.
oh,
Do you know her?
no,
She
sorry.
she was
Yeah.
the one that won that. She's a great singer in Seattle. She
Ah.
was the one that won that competition.
So at that time she wasn't famous, right? Or she was already.
She's a working jazz singer, but she
Okay.
just happened to get enough votes to win it.
Ah, okay. And earlier, Bevan said that some of your work was reflective of Bach. So did you study Bach? Do you listen to Bach? How does Bach fit into with you?
I'm not sure how. I mean, of course, I played tons of Bach. That was the first piece I played at the age 8, the G major minuet, minuet in G. Um, I played tons of Bach, the preludes and fugues, and the English suites, and the Italian concerto. I played a lot of Bach actually
Wow.
when I was in
I,
college and through the
I,
years.
if I'm on the right track with this, no pun intended, um, I really think Suzanne has some Bach in her, in that, like I said, when she uses all her harmonic knowledge, to scat. She's one of the few vocalists who can organize some of those lines in a vertical way, meaning up and down chords, in a very adroit way. I remember hearing, after not having thought about it for at least 10 years, when Suzanne sent me the recording of Birdlike, which is the first tune on the album, I was really astonished at how fleet and how supple and incredibly, really effortless her harmonic command of things. And it just reminds me of, it's not the same style, but yet the concept is the same. It reminds me of Bach going up and down these chords, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, sometimes very fast, actually probably a lot faster in many cases. So I'm sure that early experience with your piano playing, with all those things, translated somehow in your mind, the importance of that, the importance of outlining the harmony.
Yeah.
And then later the jazz thing came along.
Yeah, because Bach it's almost like 5/1, 5/1. He goes through a lot of keys, right? He's moving through keys.
Yeah.
Brahms does the same thing. Brahms has a lot of that. And that's what we do in jazz. You have to be ready to go through a lot a lot of different keys when you're in a tune. And I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday about how jazz musicians, we have a lot of different influences, and many of these influences are what actually inspire us to keep going toward our objective,
Right.
toward our goal.
Right.
So whether it's Coltrane or Miles or Bach or Brahms or Aaron Copland or Aretha Franklin, it's like whatever moves you. I think a musician will take that, assimilate things, and then try different things, and it all kind of comes out in our own voice. And that's why nobody really can be compared to another person, because everybody's got different influences.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like hard to compare people and say, well, they do this like so and so, because nobody does anything really the same, Anyway.
That's right. That's part of the joy of it, is that you really get to hear the individual person. I mean, I think there's been a little blurring of that desire lately with younger players, but because everybody's got so much, everyone has so many resources to go to now. It's not just, some records and maybe a little bit of sheet music or scores, but it's all these things on the internet where you can learn about different players very quickly. But there's nothing like real live experience, trying to play. And it used to be that, the whole goal was just to sound like yourself, to have an individual identity. And so what Suzanne's saying makes a lot of sense that way.
You said that, Bevan, you said that you were busy with a lot of stuff, and then you wanted to get your head out of that, and then started working with Suzanne. So the other work, was that your environmental compositions?
Well, it's just quite a few different things. It's different every week, but I have written a few pieces fairly recently that have environmental themes, and very time consuming. One was an orchestra piece that just came out on a couple of months ago. It came out on a classical label. It's a guitar concerto called Santa Monica Mountains, which is about the gigantic, vast area in the Santa Monica Mountains that's a national park, but faces, of course, a lot of dangers from climate change and from the fact that it's in the middle of what is one of the largest cities in the world, but yet it's just this wilderness, this beautiful mystical wilderness. And so I spent, you can tell I'm using a lot of words to describe this, so you can imagine. I spent a lot of time, thinking about the thematic elements in it, and I went on for months and months. It was a commission from an orchestra in California, and so and I did a few other things like that too. I have an album, Talking to Trees, which is about trees, that also features a vocalist, Tierney Sutton. Um, and so it was really refreshing to get out, um, get away from, the writing desk and the piano at home and do some gigs with Suzanne and do other tunes as well. It's not just the Freddie Hubbard stuff, but some other material as well. Um, and like I said, it's always great because Suzanne is, like I said, an instrumentalist who has who happens to be a vocalist, but who functions often as a total instrumentalist. And so we have this kind of flexibility that musically can happen that spans a lot of different things. So it can be very inventive, along with my instant composing, I suppose, contributing to that and keeping everybody on their toes.
Yes.
It's just really fun, It's
Yeah,
not
I
like
look
it's not like
forward
a
to it.
singer just, singing the head of a tune and that's it. I mean, I have to do a lot of that anyway, but this is very refreshing.
Is there
Oh,
personality to various different keys? And are the keys with the trees compositions more minor than the keys that Suzanne sings in?
Oh no, I think it's both. I mean,
yeah.
sometimes it is, but there's a lot of major and there's a lot of other things too. It's not just one situation because uh, on the Trees album, the Trees all have different personalities. So yes, there's some major, there's minor, there's modal, there's combinations of all that and exotic scales as well. So different for every piece, I would say.
Yeah, every tune is there. I mean, sometimes major, sometimes minor.
Oh, so you mentioned just very curious. Just mentioned that the trees have different personalities. Do you talk about their color, the shape of them? What makes them different, and or the situation that they are in?
Well, I think a lot, that's a good point. I think a lot of it has to do with the situation they're in. Um, the mango trees in Florida, for instance, are extremely important. They hold soil together, they hold part of the environment together. They do a lot of things, but they're in constant danger from pollution right now. And they're very important in the Florida wetlands. So a lot of that has to do with their position. Um,
Were they grown, or were they naturally there?
Naturally there.
Oh,
Yeah, naturally there. Um, say, take for instance, an oak tree, um, which is, again, has a lot of responsibilities in the forest. So it's not only the size and the shape of it that's very magnificent, but it's all the things that it does.
Hmm.
It enriches the soil. It supports a lot of animal life that does things that we're just starting to discover are really all connected to each other, and the micro beings in the soil, benefit from this, and so eventually it benefits us as well as the air, of course, that we breathe.
hmm. And did you say mango trees in Florida or mangroves?
Mangrove trees.
Mangrove. Yes, they.
Did I
Yeah.
say mango? I didn't mean mango.
Mangrove.
I was thinking of mangrove. Yeah.
Uh,
That's
yes.
in the lyric, right? To Redwood.
Yeah.
Is mangrove in there?
It
Oh,
could be. Yeah. Yeah. A redwood is another example. That's another piece I wrote, um, and it's a very involved piece. But again, it's about the way they look for sure. I mean, the majesty, the amazing size, and the peacefulness
Hmm.
also that they kind of communicate with. But it's also about how important they are for our peace of mind. I don't think it's any coincidence that just at the end of World War II, the United Nations was actually first started in a redwood grove near San Francisco, because the leaders of the free world and their subordinates felt that it was important to have a conference there in such a peaceful place after all the destruction that happened all over the world. So they have a long history of creating peace in our heads. And besides that, it's just very healthy to be amongst them. So a lot goes into the writing.
Suzanne, have you done environmental pieces with Bevan?
Yes, we did. We did some of those in February. We did a few gigs and did some of his things with some new lyrics, and yeah, beautiful. And then his next record is "When the Cup is Lifted," is beautiful also. Yeah, you've really been documenting your, of course, documenting your music, but documenting your life, like your beliefs and your interests
Yeah,
and the things that you feel really strongly about, like when the cup is lifted, this fusion of classical and jazz and the idea that people are communicating with one another,
yeah.
and so I really am inspired by that because that's something that I really feel at this point in my life. I need to document some. I did of course, the Coltrane Love Supreme, and that's going to be being reissued in November, and that's very much a thing that in my beliefs. But I just feel like I'm really inspired by you, Bevan, how you really have documented this part of your life. It's a lot
Yeah.
more than just the compositions. It's a whole way that you believe in how the earth needs to be treated, and
Yeah.
the path to peace.
Yeah, and also community too. I mean, when the cup is lifted is partly about that. It's it drew its inspiration actually from a restaurant in New York City called Aya,
Mm.
which is owned by Palestinians. It's a Palestinian restaurant, and yet you can walk into it any day and you'll find that half the clientele is Jewish, sitting down to eat with the Palestinians, and everybody has a good time and everybody gets along. And I thought, this happens when people share food, when people share a cup. And then coincidentally, a friend of mine in LA, a poet, Mandy Khan, wrote a poem coincidentally called When the Cup is Lifted. So I drew some inspiration from that because it was almost about the same topic, about how community happens when and people get along, when you break bread together, when you just have a cup of wine, a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a glass of water for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, So, has Bevan inspired you in community projects, Suzanne, and environmental projects like more than you have before?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I just really want to do a record of all original music. I'm really, trying to be put a little bit of pressure on myself to conceive something that expresses my honest thoughts about my life and about life. I just really, but I think, when you see people that doing this, I think it's inspiring, because, we're not going to be here forever. So now's the time to really create your honest voice, your most authentic voice.
I think there's
And
also a tradition in jazz with this kind of thing. I mean, some of Duke Ellington's suites deal with some of these things. And also Charlie Hayden with the Liberation Orchestra too.
Yeah, Max
So,
Roach,
yeah, Max Roach,
you
exactly.
know,
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
just I think uh, a lot of yeah, jazz music, especially around civil rights and
Did
the environment.
yes. Did Bevan have any inspirational influence on you for your rendition of uh, The Secret Life of Plants and Emerged Dancing?
No, that was not
Okay.
he was not involved in that. But that's another one, that Stevie Wonder tune, The Secret Life of Plants,
Mhm.
which I did on my previous record. Yeah, that's a very special tune.
Yes, it is.
But
Okay.
we're sort of thinking, Bevan and I live far apart because he's in New Mexico and LA and I'm here in New York, but we're just trying to figure out a way to do some gigs, duo gigs, right? We're trying to think of how we could do that somewhere.
Mhm.
I'm sure we'll be able to do it in New York fairly soon, and definitely do some of this material for sure, because Suzanne has a line on this kind of thing, and I think when you feel that way, like Suzanne does, it comes across, in the performance. Um, a lot of people, I mean, this goes, you know, for everybody. I mean, we all have times where we have to play certain repertoire, we have to perform certain repertoire, and we go on automatic pilot. But Suzanne takes it a step further, with, especially with all her harmonic ability, and and also, the commitment to this kind of thing. I mean, even I know this about you, Suzanne, just not from knowing you for so long, but just your emails. You have a very inspirational quote from,
Oh,
uh,
yes, yes, Daisaku Ikeda.
yes, yeah,
Yes, my mentor. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Well, you know, that's the other piece of it. And I know that I talked about this when I did the interview here for Emerge Dancing, that at this point in our lives, we have so much to say, and the music is the vehicle for that to be said to people. I think it's just so important. So it needs to be meaningful. you know you don't want to do anything kind of trite.
It
Try to do meaningful. But I think if I would really like to find a few venues somewhere to do some duo playing again. I think that would be really, really great.
Yeah, sure.
So if you were to be playing together and let's say every night, would every performance be different the way that you do the harmonics, or
Yep.
that's fun? Is
Yeah, it will have to be different. I mean, we can't predict what will happen. There's so many intangibles. But one thing we do know is that every performance will be different. Well, and it also, the venues have something to do with that too.
Hmm.
Oh,
So maybe we'll end up in Chicago one of these days. Who
I
knows?
would love that. Yeah. I
and
haven't played there for a long time.
what kind of intangibles? I know they're intangible, maybe, but what kind of intangibles are we talking about that affect harmonics and a rendition?
Well, for instance, I did some gigs in Boston recently, and one venue was relatively small. It was a very well-known jazz venue, and they only were able to accommodate a few people normally in the audience, but for this event, it was very, very crowded and really, really packed. They broke the fire laws, as a matter of fact, just to get all the people in. And so the audience, the energy from the audience was really part of the band's performance. We felt the energy coming from it. Was a great audience, as often Boston audiences are. They're really tuned into the music and they really love it. And there was just, you felt like they were right with you, whatever you were doing. So when we wanted to go in a certain direction, we had no qualms about going in that direction because we felt the audience would be right with us. And they were. You could just tell by the way they were, you could hear different exclamations at different times during the performance, and especially at the end of the performance. And then people came up afterwards and said, we were with you. We followed, it was just great to follow you. But there are other venues that are much, say, bigger, much bigger, and you're much further away from the audience physically. And so you have to kind of project in a different way. Perhaps you don't play in such an intimate way. Sometimes perhaps you don't get so detailed in the performance, but you try to project quite a lot. Maybe you're playing not just louder, but you're playing more forcefully in certain ways to reach them because they're much further away. So
Is the sound better with a packed audience, or is it better with an open area?
Well, you like to have a nice acoustic space no matter where you are, but so I think it really just depends. If there's more and more people there, that might change the sound a little bit to a certain extent. But if it's a well-constructed venue, you're still going to get, the sound that you want.
Do people absorb the sound?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And with acoustic instruments, I think it's a very healthy thing. If you get very close to the instruments, you feel the sound waves come right to you, and it really makes a huge difference.
How does it feel?
It feels good. It feels energizing. I think it produces endorphins. I also think it makes you feel connected to the people next to you. If it's all electronic, it's very impersonal, and it can be, the sound feels artificial to me. It may not to the musicians, but it feels artificial to me when it's magnified electronically too much, or whether it's primarily emanating from electrical instruments or machines. It just doesn't work the same way. I think for really young people, they can't necessarily always tell the difference, but I think that if they went to a few concerts where they were up close to acoustic instruments, they would feel not just the sound waves, but the warmth and the energy. I think live music is very important that way. It goes back to ancient times when, people just had maybe pan flutes made of reeds and, a few drums and singing of some sort or chanting of some sort. And people could really feel that right away. It was very direct. And then instruments became much more sophisticated, but nevertheless, they were still made of wood and things like that. And it was the musicians' bodies and minds and hearts that were, making sounds come through them. So when it's good that way, it's like an experience like no other. I always wish for orchestral audiences to somehow, instead of be in their seats, to climb up on the stage and be right next to the conductor, where they feel the power of the instruments the most, coming right at them. And it's just an extraordinary experience.
What about with voice, Suzanne? Is what Bevan is describing now, does that happen with your vocals and the audience?
Yeah, the voice is an interesting thing because, well, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Some people can just not even worry about their sound and they always sound the same. But if I don't hear it quite right, or like if I'm buried by the other instruments or I'm pushing a little bit too hard, it becomes a little more uncomfortable. So there's a certain, because, the speakers, this may be not what you're asking, but the main speakers are in front of you, above and in front of you. And so when you're hearing, if you're behind it, you're not hearing it quite in sync with how it's coming out. And so you need a monitor. And then if the monitor is pointing at you, and then if that ends up being too low or too loud, it can, affect the performance a bit. So it's a tricky thing. That's why the duo will be great. I think the duo is great. You just put the lid up on the piano and have a little bit of amplification.
Well, you can always climb into the piano.
That's right.
You want to change the sound a little bit, um, but yeah, that's quite right. I think Suzanne's quite right about that. Especially with voice. I mean, you can have a choir, that's a whole nother story, but a solo voice is very intimate in a lot of ways. And it's the original musical instrument, the first musical instrument. So there's a primacy to it. And you want to hear that in all its different colors. And amplified sound can change things. Yeah, like Suzanne said, with speakers, you might hear something a quarter of a second later or a half second later, and that can really, mess you up quite a lot.
So Suzanne, when you're singing, let's say to an audience in a small room versus uh, an open area, uh, what's different? Does it sound better when in a tighter space, or how do you feel?
It's it's hard to I think it's hard to say because if you have drums and everything, that's going to be different than if you just have a piano, you know. Um, in a tight space, yeah, I don't know. I'll find out because I'm going to be playing at the Five Spot. The Five Spot Jazz just reopened in New York City in the East Village, and I'm going to be playing there on September 10th. And it's a kind of intimate room, and all they have for a PA is just a tower thing that's kind of behind you. So I'll know, and everybody's saying that the drums and the piano are very loud in there. So I guess I'll find out. But I don't know. I think any room has its challenges. So the duo can sometimes be the most effective in terms of getting it quick. Or a trio, acoustic trio. I guess you can, a lot of that has to do with listening to one another and playing at a certain volume, I guess.
Oh. So you could adjust well after you've been doing it so long, and then if you have a trio, then you could adjust for one another and then make it sound better than if there were fewer people.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
I mean, one way or the other, we have to adjust when we get up there. Drums have to play a certain level, everybody has to play a certain level so that there's a balance on the stage.
okay. If our listeners want to learn more about you, Bevan Manson, and about you, Suzanne Pittson, where should they go?
You want to
Oh,
give your
well,
website?
yeah, you can always go to my website, which is www.bevanmanson.online, bevanmanson.online. That usually has a lot of information about the latest recordings and performances going on, whatever I'm writing. You can also hear, um, like I said, the classical music thing. You can hear the latest release on Navona Records, Navona, Navona Records, and the title of the album is called Echoes of the Land. It's a complete, it's about the environment. There's another composer on there, also Ashley Hoyer. I have two pieces on there, including the guitar concerto. Navona Records. It's a really great classical label. And there's other things on YouTube. I do have a YouTube channel, and there's some older classical things of mine from Albany Records. So if you go to Bevan Manson on Albany Records, you'll be able to find some things. Jazz stuff, if you go to Maestro Music Productions, which is the trombonist Ed Neumeister's label, that's on Bandcamp. Maestro, Meistero, Maestro Music Productions. Some of the albums we talked about tonight are on that label. So that's another place to go.
And spell Bevan for us too.
Oh, Bevan, it's like Evan with a B. That's the easiest way to remember it. It means son of John, actually. Evan is John in Welsh. So it's
Really?
B as in Baker, Evan. Bevan Manson, Manson. No relation to Charles. I always have to put that in because
Put that in there.
somebody's going to ask.
And Suzanne?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, Suzanne Pittson, Suzanne, Suzanne Pittson, Pittson, .com. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and Suzanne Pittson Jazz on Instagram. And I have this new, we have this new EP, Conversations,
Yes.
Conversations.
Beautiful. Yes.
And then I'm also in November I'm going to be reissuing my Resolution, the music of John Coltrane that I did in 1999. But I've added some tracks and taken out some and remixed it, and I'm going to remaster it, and that should be coming out in November. And I'll be doing the Love Supreme at the 5 Spot on September 10th. So, and then, hopefully we'll see you in Chicago.
Yes. And all the information that you gave us is on your website too, right?
Yes,
Awesome.
yes.
There's a great alto saxophonist in Chicago, Amos Gillespie, no relation to Dizzy, Amos Gillespie, and hopefully I'll be doing a project with him also in the future. So yeah, Chicago's it's a great town. I haven't been there for a while, but I love it. It's a great town. I know there's some great jazz places there.
Yeah. I taught twice at the Janice Borla vocal camp. And she was in Naperville, right, for many, many years. And I was one of the vocal teachers in 2002 and 2012. I was there.
Hopefully, in the future, you'll be coming back too.
I hope so. Yeah, love to.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bevan Manson, pianist and classical composer, and Suzanne Pittson, vocalist and educator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.